Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Good morning, especially to my WNOS New Burns News Talk, my new affiliate at 103.9 and 1450 AM. I'm about to give you a spoiler, friends, about the game last night. So if you're driving home, having worked all night till, the 9 to 9 shift or something like that, and you're driving home, and you're thinking, I can't wait to watch the TiVo of the Kansas-North Carolina game, you may want to turn off the radio. I begin the rundown this morning by saying congratulations to Kansas. I thought game was over at halftime. I thought North Carolina was going from strength to strength. And then Coach Swift did what he did against Miami. I would love to hear those halftime talks by Coach Swift. Congratulations, Kansas. Let's get to the real news. I think we should start with the president. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, the rundown is I do headlines and I do audio in the rest of the show. But the president spoke yesterday, and I think I should put this up top because it's not really going to make things easier with a peace accord in Russia. Cut number 8.
Remember, I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter, you saw what happened to Drucker. This warrants him, he is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal. And what's happening in Bucha is outrageous. And everyone's seen it.
Genocide?
No, I think it is a war crime.
Are you going to do more sanctions on Russia?
I'm seeking more sanctions, yes. I'll have time to announce that to you.
Can you hold Putin accountable, though? You called him a war criminal.
He should be held accountable.
Without sanctions?
Well, it's not Now, I believe that war crimes happened in Bucha. I had a conversation with Ed Morrissey, who will be filling in intermittently or co-hosting with me when I'm in France in a couple of weeks. Bucha is a war crime, as is Irpin, as is our number of sites along the Russian occupation. My Lai was a war crime. That didn't make Johnson or Nixon a war criminal. And when you are trying to get Russia to leave, it doesn't help to do. I really do think the president needs to stay away from the microphone. He also told just a completely bizarre story. Cut number 9.
I remember, I'm going to digress for 1 second. I got a commercial license because my dad used to run an automobile agency. And I used to have to go up to the body shop up in Philadelphia from Wilmington. And when they'd order a trailer or a cab, they'd sell the cab. And so I had to have a license to be able to drive it up and back. And so during the trucker strike years later, when I was a young senator, there was a guy who ran steel from Deemer Steel out to Ohio. And so I decided to ride out with him, see what it was like on the strike. And I was driving, going through Shiloh, Ohio, and his handle was Big Ten. And remember, everybody, all the truck stops were being blockaded at the time during the strike. And he called. He said, Big Ten wanting to come in. I forget exactly how he said it. And the only woman truck driver I ever knew I met that day, she said, "This is Big Mama, no room." I swear to God, true story. Swear to God. He said, "I've got a United States Senator driving my truck." She said, "I got the damn president in mind, so what?" I'll never forget that. I was a very powerful guy. Anyway, that was the first woman trucker I met.
This is a debunked story, by the way. People have not believed that for years, but Joe hits replay. It's a replay button. It's your 8-track. You only have so many 8-tracks, right? You still have your 8-track in your car. You're one of those people, one of the 10 people in America with an 8-track in your car. You only got like Pure Prairie League, and if I had a producer, I'd come back with Pure Prairie League because that's my last 8-track. One more. Let me go to the rundown. I got to do the rundown. Let's get to the news, all right? Because every people who download Highly Concentrated Hugh every morning, they want to know what happened overnight. Live updates. UN Security Council is going to meet as evidence of war crimes mounts. Now, that's going to happen, and nothing's going to happen. What matters is getting Ukraine the weapons that they need to get the Russians out. Jake Sullivan said that while Russia is refocusing offensive operations on eastern and southern Ukraine, Moscow is likely to continue to strike the rest of the country to, quote, cause terror. I believe that is correct. Satellite imagery reviewed by the New York Times and other major newspapers and outlets rebuts the claims by Russia that the killing of the civilians in Bucha, more than 300, occurred after its soldiers had left town. Residents of Nova Basan, a town east of Kyiv, emerged from their cottages and farmhouses, described living through the terrifying ordeal of the Russian occupation. Threats, a strict curfew. Read one story where they sent in some supplies and followed in with a grenade. It's unbelievable what these Russian troops have done. It does not make Putin a war criminal. It makes Putin a barbarian, but we don't know if he, unless you want to define an unprovoked invasion of a country as a war crime. From the European Commission, van der Leyen, who is the president, and Borrell, who is their foreign policy chief, are going to Kyiv today. That's good. European stocks have inched higher as more sanctions loom. The U.S. and the allies have vowed additional actions against Russia after the atrocities came out. All they can do that matters is cut off the oil and the gas. That's all they can do. Don't tell me about anything else. They're expelling Russian diplomats from Italy and from other places. Great, super. That's not going to stop Russia. If you're buying Russian oil and gas, you are funding atrocities and massacres. In fact, the Washington Post headline is the Bucha massacre tests Europe's red lines on Russian energy. We'll see if it tests Russia's supply. It's not red line. It's just they're buying oil and gas. They ought not to be buying oil and gas. Russia is denying that it was them. They're saying it was Ukrainians. Right. The energy official sanctions on Russia are definitely an option, says one official, Vadis Dombrovskis, Commission Executive Vice President. There are so many officials in the European Union and the European Commission that you can get 8 quotes a day and they don't all line up. The alleged war crimes are a terrible shock to the Russian people, say the United Kingdom's former ambassador to Russia. I don't think so. They know who they are. Macron calls for Russian and oil coal ban. That's good. Biden condemned, but it's Macron. Why did Macron do that? Because the French are voting on Sunday, and Marine Le Pen, the right-winger, has surged ahead of Putin in some, not of Putin, she's way ahead of Putin, have surged ahead of Macron in some polls. Now, they'll have 2, and they'll have a chance for Macron to come back, but really, he has been kind of a bozo, and people don't forget the yellow vest brutality. Spain seized a $90 million yacht of a Russian oligarch. That's good. We're back to taking the yachts away. I like that. The U.S. has urged the UN Human Rights Panel to eject Russia. That would be good, but nobody really cares about that panel anyway. There have been 10 terror attacks foiled in Israel in the past 2 weeks, in addition to the 3 that were not foiled. So it is an effort by the Palestinians to start Intifada 3, I think. Turkish inflation has hit 61% year over year. That's Turkey. Way to go, Erdogan. Congressional negotiators have settled on a $10 billion COVID relief bill. They're not spending more money, they're repurposing money, which is good. Way to go, Mitch. McConnell stood the line there, that's good. ICE lawyers have been directed to clear cases, so they're just dropping cases. That's how they're going to get the caseload down. They've got hundreds of thousands of people awaiting adjudication. They've been directed, get rid of them. The border's going to be open. 3 GOP states have sued over the end of Title 42. Title 42 is the authority that President Trump used to ban anyone entering the country during a public health emergency. Joe Biden is going to end that and reopen the border to people seeking asylum, which are just, again, poor people. People who are desperate, people who want to get out of the Northern Triangle, people who want to get out of Mexico. I have sympathy for them. I'm a Christian. I believe you treat the stranger well. But you got to have a border, and you have to have a system, and Joe Biden is just saying, ollie, ollie, in free. And that is going to flood the United States with 2 million people this year, and who knows how many next year. That is the rundown. We have a lot ahead today on the Hugh Hewitt Show. If you are one of those people who only get the first segment, go to Highly Concentrated Hugh, the podcast, download it, subscribe, give us a comment, and you'll get this segment plus a couple of interviews every day. And that way, If you haven't got 3 hours, you'll get the best 3 segments every single day on Highly Concentrated Hugh. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back from inside the Beltway. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means David M. Drucker is in the house. That's his Twitter handle, at David M. Drucker. He is with the Washington Examiner. You see him on TV everywhere. He's the author of In Trump's Shadow as 2024 begins to spool out before us. First, we must cross the bridge to 2022. Good morning, David. Earlier this week, Leader McConnell told Jake Sherman on a Punchbowl News podcast that the generic ballot is R plus 10. And McConnell added he's never seen anything like that. What does that portend for the fall?
Well, if you're a Democrat, start checking the want ads.
Yeah, run away!
Fucking date. Look, Hugh, Leader McConnell is an astute political tactician, but you don't need to be him to look at the generic ballot and realize, as long as I've been covering politics and covering midterm elections, and I've only been doing it about 20 years, I've never seen a generic ballot so strongly in favor of the Republicans as I've seen so far this cycle. Usually, and this includes in past cycles when Republicans did quite well in midterm elections, the generic ballot will, have a slight Democratic lean, and Republicans know that's good for them. And then maybe it'll be even Steven. They know it's a little better. Maybe they're up by 1 or 2, and then they know they're off to the races. This generic ballot just looks so good for Republicans that if past this prologue, they're headed for a big win in November. Now, I'd say, and it's not to undermine the point, but just to give it some context, some people like to make comparisons to 2010, and that maybe Republicans are about to see another 2010. I think the win, if the election were held today, the win would be big. A lot of the realignment that helped create 63 seats in terms of pickups for Republicans in 2010 has already occurred. So I don't expect to see a pickup of that at that level. I'm looking more at the sort of 25 to 35 level if the election were held today. But it's this generic ballot's unreal.
I want to explain to people, I got to unpack that for people. Republicans won everything in 2010 because of Obamacare, and you can't win something twice. And so we're down to a narrower map, and redistricting has just occurred. I saw Maryland yesterday reached a compromise that will save the one Republican seat there and maybe get them a second one. But redistricting protects Democrats a little bit. They've done pretty well in redistricting. But, David, let's talk about the Senate. Previously, I thought the Republicans might be vulnerable in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I no longer think that. I think Fetterman is toast, and I don't care. My friend Tim Ryan is running into the wind, and that's unfortunate for Tim, but I want the Republican to win. And I think that Nevada is in play, definitely with Adam Laxalt. I believe Colorado is in play, and maybe even Washington State, while the Republicans are going to win Georgia, I think, with Herschel Walker. I think they're going to win in Arizona with whomever is nominated against Mark Kelly. It could be a 4, 5, or 6 seat Republican pickup in the Senate.
It's possible. Look, I think Republicans are on track to win control of the Senate. I thought that before President Biden had his political meltdown, simply because you look at historical trends for midterm elections, and in a Senate all knotted up at 50 seats apiece, Republicans only need 1 net seat. I think where the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, plus Florida are these days, all where Republicans are defending seats, some incumbents, the Florida incumbent, the rest open, I just didn't see Republicans fumbling the ball in those seats, in those states this cycle. And so I think they're in a good position. I've always believed that if Democrats are going to pull off a surprise for themselves on Election Day, the toughest out for Republicans is the Georgia seat. I wouldn't underestimate Raphael Warnock. He's a very good politician. And obviously, as we've seen from past midterm waves, Hugh, a lot of times these seats, these races are decided by just a few points, by half a percentage point. It's just that in a wave, the party enjoying the wave wins them all. But these things are not easy pickups. If Republicans can expand the map, then I would look to places like Colorado. But I think first you have to see if they can get beyond the core available seats to them. That includes Georgia, that includes Arizona, that includes New Hampshire.
I went down to New Georgia and did an event with Herschel. And don't get between a Georgia voter and Herschel Walker. And I know that they're going to throw negative stuff at him from his years of struggle with mental illness 20 years ago. And I just don't see it happen. I just think Herschel's unbeatable, David. Your last thoughts. You got a minute.
Well, look, I think Herschel could turn out to be a surprisingly good candidate, especially for a first-time statewide candidate. What I've just, when I'm asked about this, I think a lot of voters, a lot of political watchers look to Georgia and think to themselves, all right, Georgia should revert to the mean. But I don't think the mean is as Republican as it used to be, and I just think Raphael Warnock's a lot tougher of an out than some people give him credit for. But when President Biden's numbers, approval numbers in the state are in the 30s, which is something that I saw over the past couple of months, obviously that puts the Republicans in a good position there.
In Trump's Shadow is necessary reading for anyone interested in 2024. In Trump's Shadow, I will talk with David about that in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, David M. Drucker on Twitter. Thank you, America. Don't go anywhere. Hour number 2 of the Hugh. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, live inside the Beltway, joined by Byron York. You see Byron on Fox News all the time. He's with the Washington Examiner. You ought to get his morning newsletter. Good morning, Byron.
Good morning, Hugh.
I want to talk to you about yesterday's newsletter because you're onto something here. Democrats want to make 2022 all about former President Trump and the January 6th committee. I am encouraging them to do that because it's a cliff that they're jumping off of. I could not hope they do anything more than talk about the January 6th committee, which has fundamentally missed the mark and has very little legitimacy in the eyes of the average American voter. And if they talk about President Trump, they're not talking about inflation and what they'll do about it, and they're not talking about you. Are they that dumb, Byron, to do this?
Well, we thought in the way back time of November 2021 that after the governor's election in November, that they had been cured of this Trump disease, where Terry McAuliffe, the Democratic candidate, had tried to make the Virginia governor's race about Donald Trump. Didn't work. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, won. And there were a lot of Democrats who said, we need to talk about more than Trump. Well, that was then. Now they appear to be just going back to the same well, and they believe, it's impossible to exaggerate how excited they got by this ruling in a civil case by the judge, David Carter, in California, a federal district judge in California, which said that Trump had likely committed crimes. So not long after that, we saw leaks to the New York Times saying that President Biden wants Trump prosecuted. And this is just the Democrats see this and they see campaign victory. They're so incredibly excited and cannot help themselves, and now want to make Trump the villain in the 2022 midterm elections, in which he is not on the ballot, but certainly President Biden's policies are.
No, I have to declare, Judge Carter's a friend of mine. I've known him for 30 years. I've actually lost in his courtroom before, and I've accompanied him to hearings, and he's a great Marine and a great judge. And he's simply wrong when he said that because the Electoral College Act is not a criminal statute. What I think he meant to say is he violated the Electoral College Act by urging, he would have violated had he successfully urged Mike Pence to violate the Electoral College. But it's so far removed from a crime. And poor Merrick Garland gets this leak in the New York Times that Joe Biden wants him to prosecute Trump, and there's no way to do it. And if he did it, it would even hurt the Democrats. Honestly, are they this stupid? People are paying, I had to drive down to Southern Virginia to see the grandkids this weekend, $75 round trip, gasoline. And that's okay for me. I'm not going to die from that. But I can't imagine an ordinary American not thinking this is Joe Biden's fault. And they're talking about January 6th?
Listen, I think people like you, people like me, look at this and say, wow, that's crazy. Have you seen the price of gas lately? That's crazy. But yes, they think this is hugely, hugely important to their fortunes. First of all, they created, by them, I mean the House Democrats, created the January 6th committee to enhance their chances of victory in the 2022 midterms. That's why they want to get the findings out at a certain time, and they want to feature them, and they want to make it a big media event and all of that, because they believe that will help them electorally. And by the way, we're not just making this up. I mean, one of the sources I used in this was a new story in Politico that had the headline, quote, "Dems have an opening for a midterm villain. Donald Trump, you're hired." And it quoted Scott Peters, who's a Democratic representative from California. "We still have a villain. We'll have to remind people of what that was like," meaning the Trump years. So I think that Republicans, or maybe even just independent-minded people, can sit around and say, "Wow, the big issues in the midterms are, first of all, inflation and the economy, and then crime, and then the border, and then the president's handling of international crises, all of these things. And it's not Donald Trump. But do not underestimate the excitement that was created by the Carter ruling and by the January 6th findings.
I don't. I honestly believe that when you read Politico, you're reading a Democratic National Committee newsletter. I believe when you read Axios, you're reading a Democratic National Committee newsletter. I believe when you read the New York Times and that leaked story that they then had to deny that Joe Biden wants to prosecute Donald Trump. I can hear Grandpa saying, "Let's go prosecute him. Why doesn't Merrick I can hear that in the Oval. But it doesn't matter a lick to me because nobody outside of the Beltway, where you and I are currently inside, nobody outside of it reads Politico, Axios, or the New York Times. I mean, they do read it in New York. There are a few would-be governors of public opinion in the outlying regions of Berkeley and L.A. and things like that read it. But they can't even get Eric Garcetti confirmed as ambassador to India. They're falling apart here. And so I am dumbfounded that there are candidates like Raphael Warnock and Michael Bennet and Patty Murray and Mark Kelly and whoever, and John Fetterman, who wants to be the crazy liberal from Pennsylvania, that they haven't risen up, Byron, and said, "What are you, out of your mind? Do these people have a way to talk to the Democratic blue bubble to say you're out of your mind, you're going to get us killed?"
Well, it would seem that the lessons of 2021, the Youngkin victory, and by the way, the near death experience of the governor of New Jersey.
Yeah, Phil Murphy.
In 2020, yeah. It would seem that would tell you, just do not make this about Trump. But I think, it's been, we're 6 years into this, okay? 6 years, maybe 7 years if you really start the campaign of 2015.
At the escalator.
Yeah, we're 7 years into this, and it has become an ingrained habit among some Democrats, and they did, by a fairly narrow margin, win the presidency in 2020, and fairly narrow in the Electoral College. They won the popular vote soundly. But anyway, they view this as their ticket to victory, and they're not going to stop going to the well until they lose big. And I have spoken to Republican strategists in the midterms who have done a lot of focus grouping, a lot of research in all the key states and all the key districts, and they just go on and on and on about how people are upset by the cost of living. And it's not just gas, it's the cost of food, going to the grocery store, it's the cost of anything associated with buying or maintaining a house. They're struck by how deeply concerned people are about that. And then they'll say, one thing they don't care about, and it's January 6th. So the House can continue this investigation, and they can publish their findings, and they can put them on TikTok or make it in some way available to everybody. But it's not going to change the economic situation in the country.
And all the Democratic newsletters in all of the various places that come out do not matter. I got to tell you about Selena Zito, was on the show yesterday. She went to a Sarah Huckabee Sanders fundraiser of suburban women in Pittsburgh for a local candidate. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders is a rock star. And I've known Sarah a long time, and her book, Speaking for Myself, is a good book. But if Democrats were right about Donald Trump, Sarah Huckabee Sanders would not only not be a hot ticket on the fundraising circuit for other people, she would be behind in Arkansas. She is going to win. She might win unanimously. It might be like an old Soviet election in Arkansas. And so it doesn't add up, but I don't know, and I want to give you the last minute, Byron. How do they get their information? I know Nancy Pelosi is obsessed with Trump, and I know that Dick Durbin is obsessed with Trump, and I know Mazie Hirono doesn't know where she is. But what, doesn't anybody think clearly over there?
No, I don't think so. Listen, first of all, it is an important issue to them. January 6th is an important issue. And the effort, of course, is to disqualify Trump from running again so that he could be a 2024 candidate. And lots of Republicans want to be the 2024 candidate themselves, so there's going to be a primary. But Democrats are trying hard to disqualify Trump in the future and to tie all Republicans to Trump if they can. This is something that didn't work in Virginia. It's not going to work in a lot of districts where there are moderate Democrats who were unhappy when Democrats did it the last time.
Right. Quick question for you, Byron. I got to ask it because I was talking about DNC newsletters. CNN Plus has debuted. Do you subscribe?
I have to say that I do not.
Okay. Is there anybody on there? No, I haven't seen it for a minute. Is there anybody on CNN Plus whose views you care about?
No.
No. It's just like the greatest programming failure in American history is to try and start a streaming channel with nobody that Byron and I, who are sort of center-right, would want to watch. It's like a complete and utter swing and a miss. Byron York, always a pleasure. Go follow him on Twitter. So get his daily newsletter from the Washington Examiner. Come back. I'll be right back on the Hugh. Back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined by Alex Gray. Alex is running for Senate in the great state of Oklahoma. Good morning, Alex.
Hey, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you back. Last time I had you on, I missed something on my list. When I had Governor Kevin Stitt on the show when I was at the Republican National Governors Conference last year, he told me the McGirt decision was playing havoc with Oklahoma law. And I looked it up, and it is. So I didn't ask you about it. What do you think about it? What should be done about it?
You know, I'm glad you asked, Hugh, because it really is the most important issue facing the state of Oklahoma right now. For people who aren't following it closely, in 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court essentially said that the eastern half of the state of Oklahoma is Indian country. We can no longer have state law apply to most of the eastern half of our state, and it's really thrown us into chaos. And so we've got about 18,000 cases that are now being moved from state to federal jurisdiction. And by doing that, the federal court system is completely overwhelmed. If a tribal member is involved, either as a perpetrator or a victim, we're now relying on the federal court system to adjudicate it. And in practice, what that means is rapists, murderers, down to petty criminals are being let out of jail. Their cases are not being heard. They're not being investigated. And folks who are the victim of crimes, whether they're natives or non-natives, if there's a native party, are now not being able to seek redress in the federal court systems because of just the extent to which the system is overwhelmed. So it really is the biggest challenge that we're facing. And to me, Hugh, it's not just about fairness and victims' rights, which that certainly is the case, but it's also an issue, I think, of equal administration of justice. That really is what it comes down to. And we've seen for too many years now that the left in this country has been pushing a vision of justice that is so far different from Dr. King's vision of a society where we're judged by our character, not our skin color. The McGirt case just continues this move towards a racialized system of justice in this country that I think is so antithetical to what all Oklahomans and Americans, regardless of your ancestry, want to see.
Now, I'm trying to remember when Governor Stitt came in, and it's been a while, and I don't know if it was on air or off air. First of all, he's a big guy. I didn't know that. And then secondly, we talked on air and off air, so I don't know whether we said this on air or not. But he told me McGirt's not real popular in some of the tribes as well because there are victims of crime who do not want to go to the federal system. And I should add, the federal system is not set up for criminal codes. In the one place it does have ultimate jurisdiction, the District of Columbia, it is there's a District of Columbia court system for crime because otherwise you overwhelm the federal courts. There just aren't enough judges. And so I believe he told me, it might have been on air, I can't remember, that there are many people in the tribes who are also opposed to it. But he was adamant we have to get back to the Supreme Court to get another swing at the bat here and see if Justice Gorsuch has rethought his opinion, or if Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was not on the court at the time, sides with the people who believe, the four dissenters who believe it was wrongly decided.
Well, look, my governor, Governor Stitt, he's a tremendous leader, and he's been a tremendous leader on this particular issue. And I agree with his approach and that of our Attorney General, John O'Connor, to try and bring this issue to the Supreme Court. And my understanding is we're going to have a hearing on the case that they've been pushing for adjudication in the next couple of weeks, or about a month. Ultimately, though, Hugh, the issue is a congressional one. This ultimately is going to have to be decided to solve the underlying issue of the confusion that was created by this case. We're going to have the United States Congress step in and make some clear determinations about what constitutes Indian country, look at some of the old 19th century laws that are being used to justify the McGirt case, and really make things clear for all Oklahomans. And to your point about how do folks look at this, even tribal members, I was in Choctaw County, Oklahoma over the weekend, a place where there's a lot of enrolled tribal members, and everyone who I talked to, most of whom were members of one of our Indian nations, came up to me and said, we have real concerns because of the practical effect on the ground. So many people are being touched negatively by this, and the unfairness of not being able of watching a rapist, someone who's victimized yourself or a family member who's being let out of jail because they can't, because there's no jurisdiction and the federal court system is so overwhelmed they can't prosecute. I mean, that I think all Oklahomans are outraged by that.
So I want to make sure we covered that. Now I want to talk about Ukraine with you. You having served 4 years in the Trump White House and finishing up as the Chief of Staff of the National Security Council. What do you think is going to happen there, Alex Gray?
Well, Hugh, I think what we've got to really start thinking about is what is the ultimate end game in Ukraine that serves U.S. national interests. And unfortunately, the Biden administration has been only consistent in its inconsistency. And it's been inconsistent in every signal that Joe Biden has sent, whether it's talking about minor incursions or whether it's talking about what our response might be to a different Russian chemical or biological attack, or whether we need regime change in Russia, or whether Putin's a war criminal or not. I mean, you can set your watch by the fact that Jake Sullivan has to walk out to the White House lawn and fix the president's statements. It makes it very difficult for our allies and our adversaries to know whether the United States word can be trusted. And I think the biggest difference from the administration I served in is no one had any doubt when President Trump spoke that he meant what he said and he said what he meant. And because of the inconsistency and the lack of clarity about what the United States means, we're having some serious problems. So I think the first thing that has to be done is we have to start being very clear about what are our interests, what is the United States trying to achieve in this conflict. And my personal view, Hugh, as you know, is we need to be working to keep the Ukrainian military in a position where they can defend their sovereignty, they can continue to resist Russian aggression, and we can ultimately get to a place where there's a peaceful, stable resolution to this conflict, so that the United States can turn its attention in a responsible way to the greatest challenge that we face, which is the Indo-Pacific and the rise of the Chinese Communist Party.
I want to play for you President Biden on the White House lawn yesterday. This is another example of the president. I think he gets upset when people criticize him. I think he's very thin-skinned, as older people often are. And here he is on the White House lawn yesterday, cut number 8.
Remember, I got criticized for calling Putin a war criminal. Well, the truth of the matter is, so what happened to Drucker. This warrants him. He is a war criminal. But we have to gather the information. We have to continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons they need to continue the fight. And we have to gather all the detail so this can be have a war crime trial. This guy is brutal.
Alex Gray, the conclusion, verdict first, trial later, is bad for the president to say. Secondly, it's not going to assist us in getting Putin to withdraw from Ukraine or the Donbass or south of the Donbass. It's not going to help in any way, shape, or form. But the president wanted to settle a score, and so he just gave voice to this. And I shake my head. If you were running the NSC as chief of staff again, what would you do immediately upon hearing that?
Well, the problem, Hugh, is what he's saying is it may make him feel better. It may be a nice way to get out some of his frustration, but it doesn't do anything, as you say, to resolving this crisis, this conflict, in a way that advances U.S. interests. And as I said, the U.S. interest here is to show that aggression will not succeed. You can't alter the territorial balance by force. This isn't, this is not the 19th century world where the might makes right. We have to show that that's not about liberal internationalism. That's about practically what is in our interest. We don't want Taiwan to look like a ripe fruit that the Chinese can go pick because they know that aggression pays off. There are real American interests here, but at the same time, talking about a war crimes trial that only makes Putin more likely to cling to power and more resistant to some sort of negotiated settlement that will restore the pre-war equilibrium, that does nothing to advance our interests. And so I think it's outrageous that President Biden would be so flippant with his comments, whether it was what he said prior to the conflict about a minor incursion, which I think was devastating for our deterrence capabilities, to now talking about a war crimes trial. I mean, none of this is responsible statecraft here.
Last question, Alex Gray, and thank you for joining me again. I wanted to cover McGirt, I wanted to cover that, but I also want to cover energy. Oklahoma is an energy producer, and the Biden administration has said, we've given lots of permits. We haven't shut down energy production. Well, you're campaigning in Oklahoma. Do the producers believe the Biden administration has been pro-production or anti-production?
Well, I'll tell you, Hugh, in a place where energy is the lifeblood of our economy, we are very confident that we are very confident that the Biden administration is waging a war on energy production, whether it's permitting, whether it's the EPA, whether it's banning exploration in places like AMWR in Alaska, whether it's pipelines, the whole gamut of energy production and distribution. The radical environmental agenda of this administration is crushing American oil production, energy production, gas production. And even as important as that, more important than that, Hugh, is the impact on everyday consumers, everyday Americans, Oklahomans, who are having to pay $4 plus a gallon for gas. Washington elites may not find that important. They may not care. They may not understand. But average Americans, average Oklahomans get that. We get that instinctively in our wallets. It's a question of putting food on the table for your family or filling up your car or your truck. And that's what the Biden administration is doing to people with this radical energy agenda.
Alex Gray 4OK, F-O-R. Alex Gray 4OK is on Twitter. What is the website for the campaign, Alex?
That's alexgrayforsenate.com.
alexgrayforsenate.com is the website. On Twitter, it's Alex Gray, F-O-R-OK, which I like. Alex, thank you for joining me. Good luck in advancing the cause to reverse McGirt. It was just, Justice Gorsuch sometimes takes this originalism stuff to the extreme, as in Bostock and McGirt, and it does not work that way. Originalism is words spoken at the time. I think it'll be reversed. I hope it will be reversed with Justice Barrett. Tuesday, April 5th, in the year of our Lord 2022. Welcome and thank you for listening. I'm joined by Senator Marsha Blackburn of the great state of Tennessee. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
I am doing well. Good morning to you.
Good morning. I want to talk to you mostly about Judge Brown Jackson. But first, Senate Bill 2616 in the great state of Tennessee, authored by my Twitter friend, Frank Nicely, who I'm sure is a friend of yours, Senator Frank Nicely. Nice guy, but it's a blatantly unconstitutional bill trying to ban Morgan Ortegas from running in the Tennessee new congressional district. Now, you represented Tennessee for years in the House, and you never had to worry about residency requirement. Have you encouraged Bill Lee to veto this? Because it's just so blatantly unconstitutional.
You know, We've got so much on our plate with Russia, Ukraine, with what is happening with China, with what we have going on in Judiciary Committee with Judge Jackson. I lead the state legislature to the state legislature.
All right, that's a very diplomatic pass. But I will tell everyone, I hope Bill Lee vetoes it because it's so unconstitutional. Senator, you voted against Judge Jackson yesterday in committee. Why?
Well, I voted against her because I do not think she has the underpinning that I want to see a judge have. I want them to be a constitutionalist. I want them to go to the Constitution and the rule of law first and look at that first as they are reviewing cases. I have been very concerned about her overreach. When you have the Makes a Road New York case against the government, and we said that it was unreviewable, it was an immigration lawsuit, and she went in and reviewed it and put a nationwide injunction in place against the Trump illegal immigration policies. That is of concern. The way she went below minimum sentences, recommended minimums for child pornographers, the way she would release hardened criminals, the way she thinks CRT should be considered when you are making these decisions in cases. And CRT should not be considered on the same level as administrative law or constitutional law, but she would equate those. And that is just improper. And then, of course, also, when I was questioning her on CRT and on gender differences of male and male-female competition, and I asked her to define woman when she was not answering me on things that, like everybody knows, the Virginia Military Institute case that let women into our nation's military academies. And Justice Ginsburg had written that there were enduring differences between male and female. Asked her if she agreed with that, and she said, well, I'm not familiar with that case. You and I know she's familiar with that case.
I've been teaching that case for 25 years. It's Justice Scalia's very famous dissent. Can't we keep just one school? And it was a very but I loved your question, Senator, because it gave rise to the funniest set of cartoons I've seen. I can't answer. I'm not a biologist. Did you have any idea that you were going to launch 1,000 cartoons with that question?
Well, I did not. I just was trying to get her to a point that we could have a discussion on biological male-female participation and competition in sports. And honestly, I thought she would agree with Justice Ginsburg. She did not. So then I said, well, define woman. And for her to have answered in that manner, you know what, Hugh, I think that was the signal to the progressives that have been pushing this Marxist ideology that you take words out of our culture and then you don't define gender. You erase the word woman, womanhood, mother, motherhood. And then you look at what has happened in the 2 weeks since that time. You've had Disney with their decision to no longer say boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. You have the State Department saying they are going to now put X in the gender box. You have DHS saying they're going to do gender-neutral security searches. These are all significant changes.
Wait, I missed that last one. They're moving to gender-neutral security pat-downs? So women aren't going to do women anymore?
Yes, that's right.
I did not. That is
These
ridiculous.
are all changes that are happening very quickly. And what we have to realize is this is all part of the woke left agenda. But, you've got Arabella and Demand Justice and these people who've been out here raising leftist, progressive, socialist dark money and saying, hey, stick with us and we'll get you a Supreme Court justice. And then in the middle of my questions, dealing with CRT, dealing with these issues, and she will not answer what is a woman. It is kind of the spark on the culture wars.
Senator Blackburn, I think you worked a revolution. And I'll tell you that all across the United States, there is a great silent majority who believes that you know who boys and girls are and that they know who men and women are. And I believe that they all now know that the Democratic Party want to erase distinctions between XX and XY and that is going to crush them in the fall. I really do think you unleashed a revolution with that question.
That is exactly what we have seen. You know, you talked about the cartoons and the memes, but I have to tell you, in large part, it is now the moms and dads who are standing up saying, you know what, you're exactly right. I don't want my child taught in fifth grade. There's a curriculum called woke kindergarten, and they can choose their gender, or they can choose to be a cat, or they can choose to be a dog. They don't want that. That's not how parents see the world. Parents, whether they're a liberal or a conservative, they want to rear their children in the manner they want to rear their children. They don't want to be forced into having to have their children taught certain things when it does not agree with their family's values.
Senator Blackburn, you could not be more correct. The woke left has destroyed the Democratic Party because they've taken it over. And I read Gerard Baker's column in the Wall Street Journal today about Disney, and it's a savage column. I mean, I never want Gerard Baker to be mad at me, but it all comes out of your question. And if she had said, yes, a woman is this chromosomal pattern, a man is this chromosomal pattern, and some people experience gender confusion and gender fluidity, but basic biology is basic biology. Would you have an objection to that?
No, I would not have, because that would have been the agreement with Ginsburg that there are enduring differences between male and female. And as a nurse told me last week, said, hey, if this lady that wants to go to the Supreme Court does not know the difference between male and female, invite her to come work with me. Only needs to be with me for an hour.
Senator, you did a great thing. Now, I hope that you will find time to go and tell Frank nicely to lay off 2616, because I don't like to argue with Frank. But in the meantime, Senator Marsha Blackburn, always a pleasure to have you on the program. Keep coming.